Welcome to the Forum, your modern-day coffee house, where ideas can be birthed, exchanged, and wrestled with. We celebrate questions, conversation, and reason as powerful tools to enlighten hearts and transform minds, shaping a new generation of thinkers, innovators, and pioneers. We're glad you're here, so pull up a chair and let's begin.
Welcome to the Forum. I hope you've all enjoyed a coffee or something to eat from the cafe. If you don't know me, I'm Kev. I think everyone does know me, but I like smelling soap when I visit other people's houses. Right, are you ready to have some fun today? Why? What are you all doing? Because we'll see. I'm just going to take 20, 25 minutes, maybe half an hour at a push, to share some ideas that I've been reading about and finding interesting. I hope you find it interesting too, but I'm not always the best judge of that, so let's see how it goes. Right, so at Q, one of the principles that we hold dear is focusing on learning how to think rather than being told what to think. So this morning, we'll do some short exercises that show how we think in different situations. It should help highlight some of the patterns and biases that we, in the way our minds work. Sorry, I drifted off there. So, before I say too much more, I'm going to give you a quick problem to solve right now, I think. Now, is it working? Are we working? Just wait to get my slide. There we go. Right. Oh yeah, and I've called it Thinking Twice, How Our Minds Work, and Why It Matters. So, the first problem that I'm going to share with you, you might have seen it before, but let's have a look. A bat and a ball together cost £1.10. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? I'll give you a few seconds and see if you can work it out. Anyone got anything yet? Feel free to shout out. Any quick answers? 10p. 10p. Who got 10p? Raise your hand if you got 10p. Who didn't get 10p? Hands up. Would any of you care to explain how you didn't get 10p? Anyone want it? Would you be happy to speak on the microphone for a second? Or no? Would you like me to? Yes. Pete, thanks. Okay, here we go. I've gone rogue, Christoph. I've gone rogue. Are we on?
If the ball costs 10p and the bat costs £1, the bat costs 90p more than the ball.
Ooh. I was going to say that. Let's have a look. So, the problem explained is it's actually 5p plus £1.5. So if the ball was 10p, it would mean that the bat itself would have to cost £1.10 because we said that it's £1 more than the ball, which makes the total £1.20. So what this highlights is the two systems of thought, a fast one and a slow one. So I thought I'd share some of what I've learned about understanding the way we think. So everything I'll refer to is from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. Has anyone read this? Yeah, George has read it. And this book really opened my eyes to how easily our minds can be tricked by biases and take the lazy way out. So if we care about finding truth, we need to notice when this happens and make an effort to think more carefully before reacting to what we see and hear. So if we go back to the idea of these two systems of thinking, system one, thinking fast, is like your brain working on autopilot. It's fast, it's automatic. System two is when you stop and think things through carefully. So system one is useful, but it can make mistakes. So system two helps catch them when needed, sometimes. The key is knowing when to trust your gut and when to slow down and think it through. So we've already seen this in action a little bit, and I, like many of you, came to the answer of 10p. And some of you are a little bit unsure when to put your hand up. You were like, he's trying to trick me here. But I wasn't. So it seemed like effortless. And even when I was told the correct answer, actually, I still had to really think about how to get the 5p answer. And that's system 2. So that's an example where our mind can be quick but inaccurate. I should point out, by the way, that this isn't telling us that quick thinking is bad. It's definitely necessary at times. Like when you're driving and you need to react quickly to someone cutting you off or a red light, you rely on system 1 to make the fast automatic decisions. When you see someone you know in a crowd, system 1 helps you instantly recognize them without thinking too hard. Things like brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, making a cup of coffee. Your brain does these things automatically without thinking too deeply. And when you feel happy, angry, or scared in response to something, that's system 1 that quickly reacts based on past experiences and emotions. And I don't know, like one example that comes to mind of system 1 is when you're sort of walking down the stairs, if system 2 starts to think about what you're doing and trying to figure out, like, right, well, what's on that step now. I don't know if it happens to you. It happens to me all the time. If I start thinking about going down the stairs, that's system 2. I'm going to fall because I'm not relying on system 1, which is automatically taking me down there. So our tendency, though, is to rely on system 1 too much. So by nature, our brains want to solve a problem as quickly as possible because thinking requires energy, as we're about to find out. But system 1's driving your car on a straight road with no traffic. System 2 will jump in more when it's icy, like it has been this week, for example, and when you have to make more complex decisions out of the ordinary. It's more conscious, where system 1 is more unconscious or subconscious. So, you might have seen this one before. What about this classic? Oh, yes, we know. You've most likely seen this one before. The bottom line looks longer. System 1 tells you this. But now, if you've seen this before, you already know that both of these lines are actually the same length when you measure them. And so we're more conscious of system 1's bias. And whether you've seen this before or not, system 2 now has an ingrained belief that you can't trust the length of a line that's got these fins on either end of it. And so it steps in to override system 1. So your thinking will automatically be slower whenever you see lines like this. It's an example of where system 2 steps in to tell you what's actually happening. And there's the proof, by the way. I just wanted to prove it. Yeah. Just in case you hadn't seen that one before. Okay, so I've got another problem for you, and this one is a bit problematic, because what it will do is it will illustrate the maximum processing power of our brains very quickly. Right, so this game is called Add 1. And I'm going to ask the tech guys to play that metronome while I do this next bit. There'll be a click. And what I would like us all to do together, and I'm giving you plenty of time to think about this, is if you want to start playing the click, that's fine. A bit louder. Okay. So that's every 1 second, roughly. So what we're going to do is, on the beats, we are going to go through each number and add 1 to it and say it out loud. So it'll be da, da, da. Okay, so you've done it in your head already. You're going to get it right the first time, okay? Seems pretty easy. Okay, so after 2 beats, 5. Very good. Oh, Pete's carrying on. I'm trying to go to the next slide. It's not working. Okay, we'll keep the click going if you can. We'll do it again. 1, 2, go. Do you know what the worrying thing is? This actually is the easy one. So keep the click going, because now we're going to add 3. Okay. 1, 2. Very good. Not. So it's just a murmur now. We've completely lost you there. Okay, you can stop the click. So what that's supposed to illustrate is that adding 1 is a bit more of a system 1 thing. You can roughly look at a number and go, I know what the next one is, I know what the next one is. As soon as you say, right, we're adding 3, a lot more brain processing power is needed. So some of you might have realized in that exercise, and I don't mean to sound rude, that that's the hardest that your brain has had to work in a long time. That's not me being mean. Like, even in our day-to-day life and jobs and everything, it's rare that we'll actually tax our brains to the same processing level that's required for you to add 3 in that sequence. And this is because System 2 is actually lazy and reluctant, and it only comes out when System 1 panics and goes, help! And even then, System 2 goes, well, how important is it? Do I have to? It's a bit like a lazy teenager. If you happen to be listening to this on the podcast, and maybe you were walking and tried to play along with this, you'll have got to the adding 3, and if you joined in, which would be very hard because you haven't got access to seeing the numbers, but bear with me, you would either have completely stopped walking, or you'll have significantly slowed your pace. Your pupils will have dilated, as would everyone's in this room. Now, I did think better of making you all stare into each other's eyes while we were doing that so that you could see this. But you can do it. And that is what happens. Another thing that happens, and it's worth pointing out, is that many people, like when they're listening to a talk, like say that maybe you like me, you're smiling because you want to encourage me, and which is really nice and very thoughtful of you. However, the book goes on to tell us that unless you're frowning, you're not really taking in information properly. What happens when you start trying to work things out is your face does that, your face drops, and a lot of people's faces did that a few minutes ago. But that actually, what that does is that gives your brain a signal that you're thinking slowly now. Your brain's in that second mode of thinking. And so, thank you if you're smiling at me because you want to encourage me, but you're not going to get any of this. So I don't mind if you're sitting there with a frown on your face now. Anyway, sorry, that was just a quick aside. But that's kind of a quick rundown of the 2 systems of the brain. And if you found that interesting, there's loads more other examples and tons of extra detail in the book. Like, I've barely scratched the surface, but it's blown my mind. So we'll move on now to another concept of thinking. And this is called answering an easier question, or substitution. So, another concept in the book, and I come across it a lot in day-to-day life, is the concept of answering an easier question, which refers to a mental shortcut called substitution. Now, when we're faced with a difficult question, our brains often substitute it with an easier one without us realizing it. So this helps us respond quickly, but it can lead to errors in judgment. So instead of answering the actual hard question, we unconsciously answer a related but simpler one. For example, when asked, how competent is this person to govern the country? We end up answering, do I like this person's appearance or voice? So people may favor candidates who look more confident or charismatic, even if they lack any evidence for their actual competence. Now, there's a whole chapter on this, which we can't go into now because it's very extensive. But unfortunately, the studies do show that most people really are that superficial. Here's another one. Is this product worth the price based on quality, durability, and need? The question that we actually answer is it on sale or discounted? So you might buy an 80 quid jacket that's marked down from £200, thinking you got a great deal. And even if the jacket isn't worth the £80 to you or doesn't meet any of your criteria or needs, you still think it's a good deal. So these substitutions, they save mental effort, but they can lead to poor decisions. So recognizing when you answer an easier question, like focusing on discounts or appearances instead of quality or need, can help you make better choices. However, sometimes answering an easier question can be useful to get towards the answer to the original question. So it's not all bad. It's just another thing to bear in mind if you catch yourself doing it, which you will this week, I'm sure. So the next concept is known as the availability heuristic. Don't worry. It's just a fancy way of saying we make decisions based on how easily we can think of examples. So if I said to you, which is more common, words starting with K, because examples, oh, hang on a sec, nope, I've skipped a bit there. Words that start with the letter K, or words where K is the fourth letter. I'll give you a few seconds. What do you think? I mean, you know the game now, really, don't you? So you know what I'm going to say. But people tend to think that there are more words starting with K because you easily get examples like kite, king, Kev. They're much easier to recall. However, as you probably guessed now, the actual number of words with K as the fourth letter is much higher than with the first letter. So it's things like awake, back, cockeyed. But our brains rely on what we can easily remember, even if it's not accurate. So, for example, you might feel that your area is unsafe because you've been on Facebook and you've heard about a burglary or some violent crime. And I see this all the time on my Facebook, specifically about my local area. And even if the crime rates in your area are low, the vividness and recency of the story can make you think that it's more common than it actually is. So you end up saying, well, I'm not going outside then. Now, this shows how easily accessible events in your memory can distort your perception of reality. So this now leads us to the next one, which is similar, but it's a much bigger and more contentious one. And I've just mentioned how the media reporting things can sometimes skew your perception of reality. Now, in the book, there's a bit that had me sort of sweating while I was reading it. And it was the chapter on something called the availability cascade. So, in simple terms, it means that when something becomes more and more believed by people just because it's talked about a lot, even if it's not necessarily true. So the more you hear something, the more it feels true because it's constantly on your mind. This ties into some of the talking that we've done here in the past on religious thinking. And when we say religious, we're referring to patterns that we now see in society that we recognize from our own religious background. So you can find our older talks on these issues, including Joel's from last week. He touched on it if you missed it and you want to catch up. But anyway, in this chapter of the book on thinking, which was written in 2011, I have to clarify, he describes the ins and outs of this concept of the availability cascade. I'm going to read it as a direct quote, so it might be a bit dry as the book is quite hard going, but try and bear with me. So, an availability cascade is a self-sustaining chain of events which may start from media reports of a relatively minor event and lead up to public panic and large-scale government action. On some occasions, a media story about a risk catches the attention of a segment of the public which becomes aroused and worried, not that kind of aroused. This emotional reaction becomes a story in itself, prompting an additional coverage in the media, which in turn produces greater concern and involvement. The cycle is sometimes sped along deliberately by availability entrepreneurs, that is, individuals or organizations who work to ensure a continuous flow of worrying news. The danger is increasingly exaggerated as the media compete for attention-grabbing headlines. Scientists and others who try to dampen the increasing fear and revulsion attract little attention, most of it hostile. Anyone who claims that the danger is overstated is suspected of association with a heinous cover-up. The issue becomes politically important because it's on everyone's mind, and the response of the political system is guided by the intensity of the public sentiment. The availability cascade has now reset the priorities. Other risks and other ways that resources could be applied for the public good have all faded into the background. He then goes on to explain two cases where the availability cascade played out to the standard script. Now, I'll just go through one of them as an example, even though you might be thinking of some other examples in your head. There's one that's called the Love Canal Affair, which sounds like the title of a soap opera episode, but it's not what it seems. In Love Canal, which is a place in Niagara Falls, buried toxic waste was exposed during a rainy season in 1979, causing contamination of the water well beyond standard limits, as well as a foul smell. The residents of the community were angry and frightened, and one of them, Lois Gibbs, was particularly active in an attempt to sustain interest in the problem. The availability cascade unfolded according to the standard script. At its peak, there were daily stories about Love Canal, scientists trying to claim that dangers were overstated, were ignored, or shouted down, and ABC News aired a program called The Killing Ground, and empty, baby-sized coffins were paraded in front of the legislature. A large number of residents were relocated at government expense, and the control of toxic waste became a major environmental issue of the 1980s. The legislation that mandated the cleanup of toxic sites, called CIRCLA, established a super fund and is considered a significant achievement of the environmental legislation. It was also incredibly expensive, and some have claimed that the same amount of money could have saved many more lives if it had been directed to other priorities. So opinions about what actually happened at Love Canal are still sharply divided, and claims of actual damage to health appear not to have been substantiated. Curran and Sunstein, they're the guys who ran this study, wrote up the Love Canal story almost as a pseudo-event, which basically means an event brought about merely for the sake of the publicity it generates. While on the other side of the debate, environmentalists still speak of the Love Canal disaster. So there was a lot to digest in that story, but please hear me, like the main point I'm trying to get across here isn't to tell you that all news and media is false. It's more how we respond when we're exposed to it. Will we think fast or slow? The fact that people are still divided on these events, on what actually happened, even decades after the case of the Love Canal, and even if you think about the more recent events like the pandemic, the availability cascade plays out in this way. The truth still doesn't come out because there are still strong opposing views on what happened. With all the things that we've experienced in the world over the past 5 to 10 years, have we lived in fear because all the messaging has been geared towards appealing to system one, the automatic emotional knee-jerk responses, which then, does that give us a faulty view of reality? Understanding how we think through the interplay of fast, intuitive responses, that's system one, and slower, deliberate reasoning, system two, is crucial for navigating a world full of biases and mental shortcuts. From answering easier questions to relying on vivid but misleading memories, our minds often default to conserving energy at the expense of accuracy. Concepts like substitution and the availability heuristic that we've mentioned, and the cascades, show how our perceptions can be shaped by emotion, convenience, or repeated exposure, sometimes leading us from truth. And it's key to emphasize sometimes, because it's not every time. It's up to us to figure that out. So the challenge for us all is to notice when these biases are at play, pause and invite our slower, more thoughtful reasoning to step in, And by doing so, we not only make better decisions, but also cultivate a deeper understanding of the world and a stronger connection to reality. If we train ourselves to pause and question, even in the smallest moments, we'll not only think more clearly, but we'll also live with greater intentionality. Now, before I close, as someone who's still looking kind of where spirituality fits, I do want to acknowledge that the relationship often between rational thinking and spirituality, at first glance, they can kind of seem at odds. But I think there are some incredible conversations happening about how they can coexist. And it's a bit of a teaser, so I'm not going to go into it, but it's something I've been exploring for a while, and perhaps it's a topic that we can explore in future weeks down the road. But that kind of draws us to a close on these things that I've brought. Thank you so much for listening and indulging. And I appreciate that there might have been a lot, and honestly, I've barely scratched the surface on what's in that book. There are many different concepts in here, and I've just sort of cherry-picked a few of them that I thought were worth sharing. So I'd highly recommend it, even though it's a bit long and dry at times. So go and grab another cup of coffee, have a chat about some of this stuff, and I'll just have to say that when we get to 12 p.m., feel free to continue your conversations, but if we could ask you to go through into pillars so we can clear the forum hall, that would be much appreciated. Stay tuned as well, as we've got lots of events to announce that are coming up in the not-too-distant future. I'm told that there is a walk and talk on Saturday. Where's that going to be, Mick? 25th, meet here, 10 o'clock, and we'll see where you're going to go. St. Nick's, Little St. Nick's. Naturism. Nature Reserve. Sorry. Okay. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, go and get a cup of coffee. Thanks for being here. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.